Hi, and welcome to part 2 of our series on navigating the holidays.
Navigating the holidays.
I'm Pam Wool. I'm the Director of Family Services at Gender Spectrum.
And I'm Lisa Kenny, Executive Director at Gender Spectrum. Holidays are here. We've got Thanksgiving in a couple weeks, and then, of course, all the December holidays, super exciting, but sometimes a source of some anxiety for people.
Exactly. We did part 1 of the series, if you haven't seen that, on kind of sharing information with your family and friends. And this is part 2, and where we're going to talk about preparing your child for the holidays. So it's really a good idea, especially if this is kind of new information for your family and friends, to kind of help your child think about ahead of time what that might be like. We talked about in part 1 preparing the other people, but it's also important to talk a little bit to your kid about what they might expect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know your family, you know who's showing up at the family event, and it's really important to kind of think about. You never quite know how people are going to respond, but you should have some idea of that, especially if you did do some of the things we talked about in part 1, in preparing them, and maybe you've had some conversation with some folks before you all showed up. But either way, it can be a little bit of a unknown factor, and so really helpful to help your child think about what are some of the questions that they might get, and thinking through how do they want to respond.
Exactly, and kind of assessing up front how your child is feeling about this kind of information being shared. So I think the first step is always kind of saying, what do you want? Like, so some kids have done a social transition. It'll be very obvious, and there's no sense of sharing or not sharing,
Right.
And other kids, might still be in the process and have ideas about how much they want to share and not share.
Right.
So I think that's the first question, is kind of try to assess with your kid where they're at, what they want, to share and not share, and they might be super excited, right? They might be very excited about this, or they might be nervous, or
both, right? I mean, and in all likelihood, at least our experience is such in working with families that it is both. And it is really important to remember that they are probably really excited and scared, because the realization that your family can reject you in any way, I mean, for all of us, is so intense that it can keep us from disclosing who we are to family for many different reasons in many different ways. Yeah. And so even if your child's really excited, even if your child is really comfortable with who they are, there also might be a real underlying fear, and you might see that behavior sort of unusual behavior maybe showing up as it gets closer to it happening.
Yeah.
It also isn't unusual that somebody says, "Yeah, I want to," and then as it gets closer, begins to, and they think, "Wow, how might grandma or grandpa feel, or aunt so and so, or uncle so and so?" That then they might begin, "Well, I'm not sure," and it's really helpful to help them through that fear, and to recognize it as fear, and not that, oh, maybe they're retracting. Sometimes parents really get worried, like, oh, does that mean maybe they're changing their gender, or does that mean, and no, I don't think I've ever seen a situation where it really meant that it was changing their gender. What it really meant, as you could imagine for all of us, when we get ready to disclose something so fundamental about who we are to people whose love we desperately need, it's incredibly vulnerable making.
Right.
And so how do we really help them navigate that? And certainly the age of your child makes a big difference. I mean, if you've got, a little one, how do you deal with that? If you've got, somebody who's an older teen or a young adult, helping them think about the same things. You might think, oh, they really don't need me to help them think about that, or they should be doing this on their own. We're never not a vulnerable child or grandchild or niece or nephew or whatever it is. We all need that. So regardless of the age of your child, really let them know you're their partner in this.
Right.
That you're with them and you're going to help them in whatever way that they want the help and support.
Right. And if your child is little, as we said in part 1 of the series, you're not going to be you're going to be really clear to family and friends, that we're not going to talk about this in front of my child. We're not going to, I don't want to have these conversations in front of them. This is something that needs to be among the adults. if your child's a teenager or even older, right, they may want to have the conversations,
Yeah.
and they may want to be the one to answer the questions instead of you, because
Right.
they might think they can
That's
do a
right.
better job.
Yeah,
than you.
that's right.
So that's something that to really talk about ahead of time, so it's not so you're not stepping on your kids' toes, and you're not doing something that they really don't want to
But you're also
happen.
not backing off when in fact they need you and they need some help. So just because they're older doesn't mean that they don't need some help or they're not feeling vulnerable.
Exactly.
So
having
it's-
those discussions ahead of time
Right.
is really key. So it's not like in the moment,
Yeah.
what do I do and what do I say?
So I think it's great to set it up. So one of the first thing is especially like thinking about with your child and talking about it with them, helping them think through maybe role play,
Right.
what some of the things might be like. And also I think really particularly helpful for especially the younger child to have responses to some of the questions that might come up. They feel like
Absolutely.
their response, but they're not trying to come up with it at that time. They're kind of thinking about like, yeah, what do you want to say about this or that? And I think that can help them just feel a little more comfortable going into it. And also it's what they want to say. And that's, our all being able to use our language to talk about our own experience is a very
Right.
powerful thing.
So like role playing either with your child if they're interested, or sometimes kids don't want to participate but are really interested in watching two adults role play
Yeah.
and really still get a lot out of that. And coming up with a phrase like, because even if all of the adults are on board and don't talk about it, they might have a cousin
Yeah.
or a young
Yeah,
who
that's right.
still says something to them, just like at school or on a playground,
Right.
right? So helping them come up with like saying, I'm just being myself, or that's private, I don't want to talk about it,
Yeah,
or
right,
whatever
right,
they want to
right.
say, right? But
Right.
like giving them permission
Yeah.
to say whatever response they want, and helping them figure out those words so they can deal with it and move on and not be kind of stuck in the moment and have really negative
Yeah.
feelings.
One thing too to talk about with your child, I think in advance that can be helpful is how are we going to check in while we're there?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to assume it's not going well. You also
Right.
don't want to assume it is, and yet you just want to be able to have a simple way to assess. Hey, are you doing okay? Or are you not doing okay? So it's nice to maybe set that up in advance and think about. Hey, how about we check in a couple times? We don't have to have a big discussion about it, but there's a way in which you can let me know whether or not you're sort of needing some extra help, or if you're good and you got it. In fact, maybe it's going great,
Yeah.
and
That's a great idea.
so just some way to check in would be good
Yeah.
to think through ahead of time.
That's a great idea. So I think that's it. It's really just like, don't ignore it. Don't let it just happen. Think about it ahead of time. Prepare yourself. Have the conversations with your kid ahead of time, and hopefully it'll be a positive experience.
Yeah, and imagine it as a wonderful thing, because really, anytime that we are our authentic selves, it's a powerful, powerful thing, and to be able to do that, hopefully in a context of love, around the holidays with people that care for us. What better way really could it be if all things go well? So we wish you the best this holiday season, and we hope that your time with family is terrific, and that you and your child get a wonderful experience with the rest of your family as they are their authentic selves.
That's right. Happy holidays.
Happy
everyone.
holidays.